It has been hit the record button.
We're doing
Simon,
it.
you're like you're shape shifting every time I see you, man. Seriously.
You'll like these. Hold on a sec. Here,
Let's see it.
Let's get these out.
Whoa, baby. You're like a Viking or something, man.
Yeah, I got some nice braids going. That's what I was trying to show you anyways.
You're like a Norse Viking or something. Like you're always changing on me.
Somebody told me I look like a Norse god.
Yeah, you
I
could
was
be
like, well,
Thor. You might be Thor.
Yeah. I said, you haven't seen me with my shirt off. I'm the Norse god of wine or something. I don't even drink, but I'm not as cut as Thor should be.
It's the real Love and Thunder coming.
That's right.
Simon,
That's right. Love handles and thunder thighs, baby.
Oh man. So, dude, man, I watched Wind River at the last minute last night. I was like, I got so crazy. I was like, I have to watch this. I have to. And I was blown away. I was like blown away. Man.
So I wanted to rewatch it, but I couldn't. I mean, not that I didn't have the time. All of us are so busy all the time, but I could have made time for it.
Yeah.
But every time I thought about rewatching it, I was not let's just say emotionally stable enough to consider watching such a powerful film again. You know what I mean? I was just like, no, I can't go through that again right now.
Yeah. It's heavy, man. It's heavy.
There are scenes in that movie. I'll tell you the one scene that I was like, no, just stop pretending you're not crying right now, Eli.
Yeah.
You know, when the father of the victim, the main victim of the story, is sitting there with his painted face.
Yeah.
And he says, I'm wearing my death mask. And the other character asks him, how did you know how to do that? And he says, I don't. I just made it up. There's no one left to teach me.
Yep.
And I just,
wow.
I feel like we are not unique in this way, you and I, but I feel like we have similar, not similar ways of placing importance on heritage.
Yeah.
I think you as an African American and not just African, but there's an importance on heritage there, right? I've grown up Mormon. My family on my mother's side has been Mormon since the time of Joseph Smith.
Yeah.
There's a real heritage there, whether you want it or not.
Yeah.
So to hear from somebody to say, there's no one left to teach me my own heritage.
Yeah.
That's heartbreaking for me.
It is heartbreaking. Yeah. It really drove a stake through your heart about the plight of Native Americans and the desolation and the kind of destruction of it. And even like Jeremey Renner, one of my favorite scenes was when he was in the hospital with Elizabeth Olsen's character. You got lucky. We got lucky. He said, no, luck happens in cities. That happens there. He said, out here, you either survive or you surrender. And then that hit me like a ton of bricks when he said that. I was like, ooh.
I love that. There are certain places in the world, and I was writing to a friend about this recently. I said, when I lived in Brazil for 2 years, I felt oddly at home there. And you wouldn't suspect that from somebody who grew up in Alaska. But here's how they were the same. Once again, same, different. They were both very extreme places. And while both places have been settled, you can say, in certain areas, if you go outside those areas, it's really plain to see that the land kind of doesn't want you to be there.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Like Alaska kind of wants to kill you.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't. So I totally related to that saying. I grew up in the city of Anchorage, Alaska. So it's not like I was in some wilderness trying to
Yeah.
survive. But I understood that viewpoint of living in a place where the land itself seems at opposition with your existence.
Yeah. I get that. Like just the scenery and how they made it. I was like, man, this is like it's kind of like we said last when we did with the CGI
Yeah.
and like it looks so fake. There's nothing fake about this. The
I mean,
snow, the cold.
for a moment, were you ever taken out of it by thinking about, whether it's an interior shot or an exterior shot? The interior shots look like a home somebody lives in.
Yeah. That's right.
The exterior shots look, I mean, you never for a moment am I wondering if that's fake snow or if,
No.
it just looks the way they described it.
Yeah.
As dangerous and as cold and as miserable as their which is a great being able to, they did both. They showed and told.
Yeah. They did.
But in a lot of movies they have to tell because they're not, for whatever reason, they're not showing it to you. Maybe they don't
Yeah.
have the skill, the capacity, the budget, whatever it is. Or maybe they don't have a good enough script. So oftentimes, you hear they either talk up the villain or the hero instead of just showing how terrible they are. I was
Yeah.
just talking to the kids last night. One of my kids was really interesting. They said, Dad, when they were younger, they said they thought the Marvel movies were just flawless masterpieces. And now that they're older, they just went and watched the new Doctor Strange.
Mm-hmm.
And they're 16 now. And they said, now I'm criticizing everything. And we were laughing about that. And maybe there needs to be a balance there, some kind of forgiveness
Yeah.
for the filmmaker. But at the same time, as an audience, letting the filmmakers know we have more expectations of them. You've
Yeah.
raised the bar, now raise it again.
Raise it again.
Because now our expectations are higher now. So you need to take it to the next level. We can't, and this is kind of what our conversation was revolving around. It's like, we don't want a world-ending conflict in every movie.
That's right.
A reality-ending conflict. We're actually talking about the Doctor, and this is way off topic, but it's on topic, I promise.
Yeah.
The Doctor Strange character itself, I was saying, I was musing that how much more interesting would the Doctor Strange series be if it was treated more like an X-File?
Yeah.
Instead of, oh, I have to stop Dormammu or whoever from,
Yeah.
taking the Earth and changing it into their reality or whatever, something like that. What if there was just one simple murder that seemed so extraordinary that the only explanation was a magical force? And who better to deal with the unexplained magical than the Sorcerer Supreme to come and
Yeah.
investigate?
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be a plot in which I am completely burnt out on nation-ending, world-ending plots.
Me too.
I'm completely burnt out on it. Our conversation went into the new Star Wars movies versus the original, and we were kind of pitting The Force Awakens versus A New Hope. And I said, all you need to know about The Force Awakens versus A New Hope is how they introduce the villain. When Darth Vader comes, he marches onto that starship behind the stormtroopers who have already eradicated the resistance. And he just marches through a cloud of smoke and dead bodies. And the next scene you see him in is him holding with one arm, choking a guy, above the ground with one arm, and then throwing him like a rag doll.
Yeah.
Take that and pit it against Kylo Ren.
Yeah.
Who, before he even talks, somebody's making a joke at him.
Yeah.
It's the Poe character. He says, how's this work? Do you talk first? Do I talk first?
Yeah, exactly.
And I said, listen, not bashing that actor, but the character Poe Dameron is a low budget Han Solo.
That's right.
But go back to when Han Solo met Darth Vader.
Right.
He immediately tried to shoot him, saw that that was futile, had his gun taken away by the Darth Vader's force,
Yeah.
and then he shut the hell up.
Yeah.
He did not. How's his work?
It's not a
Well, I talk
joke.
first. You
Yeah.
talk first. Yeah. Darth Vader ain't somebody to joke with,
No.
friendo.
Yeah. Friendo.
And I just really appreciate. So now tie that back into Wind River. Never for a moment. And the bad guys in this movie, you don't even meet them until the end.
No.
But never for a moment do you think that anybody's a joke or anybody's not dangerous. Everybody that they come up against feels dangerous. The danger feels real.
It does.
And Elizabeth Olsen's character, awesome job on her part. She towed the line between playing the strong young heroine of the story and also being very vulnerable, getting into something she wasn't ready for or prepared for.
Yeah.
And culminating in that scene that you mentioned just a couple minutes ago, where it's like she still, even at the end of the film, felt like she was not ready for what she just went through.
No.
And then Jeremy Renner's character saying, no, you are a survivor. You survived this, and you survived it maybe with a little bit of luck, maybe with a little bit of chance, but by and large, because you yourself are a tenacious survivor who can overcome things that you don't feel prepared for. Great messaging to the movie.
Great
messaging that never gets preachy. Never once do you feel preached at. Do you feel talked down to? I can't remember the name of the writer director, but what a masterful job they did on both writing and directing this movie.
Incredible. Just like you think about Elizabeth Olsen's character, the standoff with all of the different people at the site when they're all drawing their guns, and she's the one that de-escalates it, at least for a little bit. I'm the authority here.
Yes.
I'm the authority here.
Yes.
And just like you don't, she's knocking on the door. And then, like, I think we mentioned this last time. John Berthnall's character is so tiny, yet so big.
He's in it for maybe 5 minutes.
It's nothing
10 minutes
almost.
Tops.
But it's so big. And I like how they went to that part. Like when she was knocking on the door and you're thinking he's going to open the door.
Yep.
And he does, but it's like a different scene from a flashback. And it's like
amazing.
Just so wonderfully done. So wonderful.
And how they flip the script on everything that you've been brought up to assume to that point. To that point, I feel like you're making all of the white man assumptions about what went down.
That's right.
She was kind of a bad seed. She was making these bad mistakes, and she was kind of prostituting herself or whatever. She was out partying, being irresponsible. And then they go to this flashback that only lasts maybe 10 minutes. I can't remember. It might have even been longer than that, but it's done so well you don't even notice that time's passing. But they flip the script on you completely. And they say, okay, everything you assumed up to this point, that's on you.
Yeah.
In this story, we never told you any of that stuff. You assumed it.
Yes.
Because we're dealing with the res and Native Americans and all of the baggage that you as maybe white people or whoever, outsiders, let's just say, have been told is the reality there. Yeah.
It's truly breathtaking. And I also I don't know what you thought about this, but like Natalie, who was, raped and who died outside, when they finally figured out how far she ran, he goes, that's a warrior.
Yeah.
And the way he essentially killed that guy, the way he did it was so counter to any movie he let the land kill him.
So poetic.
It's so poetic. He said, that's a warrior. You won't last 600 yards.
Yeah.
She lasted 6 miles. That's a warrior. And she spent all that effort to come and see John Berthnall's character. He was impressed by that. And then she spent effort trying to survive all that time. And I thought that said a lot about Native American people and the survival of this ethnicity.
Exactly. Oh man, you mentioned, that this movie is dealing with, the genocide and the eradication of this culture, and
Yes,
we talk about those things too oftentimes in the past tense, and we
yes,
don't talk about how it's still going on today. We don't talk about how today there are languages that up until now have been spoken that are dying out.
yeah,
That pretty soon there's no culture left.
yeah,
And I will say, as a white American who has European ancestry that came over, beginning with Governor Bradford, not blood related, but one of my ancestors was married to one of William Bradford's like granddaughters or something. Anyway, so my family kind of just goes back that far and that deep. But that is my point in bringing that up, is that my American heritage here is so young.
yeah,
I don't really have one. Does that make sense?
yes,
I don't have an ancient culture as an American, as a
right,
white American, to say, oh, I'm losing my heritage,
right,
because I don't, even though we've done our genealogy and I know about my European ancestry and stuff like that, I don't really honor that ancestry by carrying on traditions from the old world.
yeah,
So I don't have like a much of a heritage to lose. So sometimes it's easy to forget that a much more ancient people like the indigenous American, people of the Americas, how much is being lost,
yeah.
because I don't have anything to lose. I just
No,
don't.
no, and I got done. My wife had watched it when it originally came out in the movie theaters back in the
Mhm.
day, and she was like, it just haunted me when I went and watched it. But when I got done, I said, it's just crazy. It's like, and rightfully so, that we are putting a lot of emphasis on different ethnicities who have been unrepresented, underrepresented, and those things, and LGBTQI and the whole thing. I was like, we're giving indigenous people nothing. There's like nothing
Yeah.
happening that I
Yeah.
know of. I may be ignorant to this. I could be very ignorant, but on the mainstream consciousness, zero that I can see of.
Yeah. There's smaller movements that I know, there's a lot of people out there doing a lot of good work,
Yeah.
but what you're saying, the mainstream consciousness, I agree with
There's
you.
nothing happening.
Yeah. I actually have, like a lot of people, I have Native American ancestry as well. And actually my eldest daughter, Sunny, really took it upon herself to do much more research into that. And she's kind of embraced some of that. And I think that's beautiful and really wonderful. And she's helped educate myself and some of the rest of my family, because we actually thought we were even from a different tribe than we were.
Yeah.
So she's done some more of the genealogical work to say, no, actually we're this tribe and we're this and things like
Mm-hmm.
that. And um, anyway, it's been really interesting and fascinating. And I'm not saying that to say, oh, I get it, because I
Yeah.
have, I don't get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a great grandfather that was kind of like full-blooded Native American, but
Mm-hmm.
I have no connection to him, so I'm not
Yeah.
claiming any of that.
Sure.
um, but just from a perspective of study um, and just learning more about it, the culture is so fascinating and it's so rich and it's so ignored
Yes.
in lieu of other cultures. And I think most of that comes from, frankly, the bias of the reservation,
Yeah.
because and possibly the idea of the noble savage, which is such a
Crazy.
term that is so amazing to me that it was ever coined. But I mean, that's our history. And I have this conversation with people all the time about whether it's Christianity or America and things like that. And it's never to say, don't be Christian, don't be American, or don't be, grateful that you're a Christian or American or any of these things. But if you go back in time, a lot of what you're claiming to be proud of, you would be disgusted with.
That's exactly right.
Now, and to pretend otherwise, I think it's just really, really unhealthy.
Most definitely.
And I'm even going back to the roots of Christianity.
Yeah.
The roots of Christianity, whether or not we want to observe it or accept it, is based on human sacrifice, which we would normally talk about as a, maybe we term it as like a barbaric thing.
Yeah.
Which is not a good use of. Barbarians are much more complex than we give them credit for. But anyway, but even the animal sacrifice that was practiced for thousands of years pre-Jesus, and then the whole idea that the entire faith of Christianity relies on a human sacrifice. If you were to talk about that in any other context, you would think there was something diabolical or satanic involved in it. And the only thing separating it from being diabolical or satanic is the fact that you believe in it.
Yeah. Crazy.
So it's indigenous American mythologies are so complex and so interesting. And they're so much more interesting and fun than anything Christianity has to offer. I mean, just look up, go ahead and Google like mythological stories about Coyote's penis.
Yeah.
Weird, zany, funny, hilarious stuff. And it was really obvious that unlike Christianity, which is a very, mostly, I would say, is a very, what's the word I'm looking for? Literal belief system. We literally believe in all these things would be a Christian point of view. Whereas, an indigenous American mythology, you listen to the stories and you got to say, man, these guys had a really great sense of humor and they were just kind of making up stuff and they knew it. I mean, that's my take on it anyway.
Right. Yeah.
Because when you read some of these stories or you hear them told by a native storyteller and things like that, you're like, man, these stories are insane and fun and hilarious. And they created God. There's an indigenous American God for farting. I mean, they just had fun with it.
Yeah.
Christians don't tend to be much fun.
I mean, there's a whole other conversation on that. Sure. Yeah. I mean,
but going back to the point that because they had fun with it, there's a richness there that I think is sometimes sorely lacking in the rigid specificness of Christian belief and the literalness of Christian belief, and not and the Christian culture's inability to oftentimes grapple with metaphor and have to say everything's literal instead of accepting metaphor.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And that I was just talking about this too, that there is mystery in what we believe, and it's okay to have mystery. I mean, there's many things I can't prove. I just have to believe it, or I don't really like when you talk about God and spirits and stuff, like, how do I know? Like, is it a physical form? Is it the universe? Like, can somebody tell me for sure? I don't think so. Like, but I think that Native American culture has so much richness to it and so much tragedy to it. That I think as an American, that's just a loaded term to me anyways too. Like, as an American, you can't look back and pound your chest about this and not see the atrocities. Like, if you're just full on denial, okay, you want to deny it, but the truth is there. It's not something made up. It's just bad. It's literally just bad. Like you
Yeah.
think of Ukraine invasion, that's bad, so bad. What we've
Yeah.
done is even worse throughout the course of our time. I mean, it's bad.
Yeah. We weren't trying to even annex something
No.
or like regain, theoretically regain control of something. We were just outright stealing
The stealing.
and committing genocide to do so.
Correct.
I mean, there's no other way around it. There's no other
Yeah.
terms you can say. There's no like, well, we were westward expanding.
Okay.
It's like
Yeah. Like,
manifest destiny. It's like,
mm,
yeah. So what's
yeah.
the difference between that and Hitler killing the Jews?
Just give and take. I
Tell me the
know.
difference.
Exactly. What's the difference? Like, it's just bloodshed everywhere. And I think we have such a huge disconnect partially with indigenous culture. Also, like we just also don't have much contact with indigenous culture as a nation. We have put people into these reservations, far off places that feel like there's just no hope. I mean, there are
Yeah.
several reservations up where I live, and this part of the country, it's littered with a lot of reservations in the
Mhm.
Pacific Northwest. And you, if you listen to this or you watch this and you've never been on a reservation, I certainly have. It is it's stark. It
Yeah.
is it is so depressing on many levels. Like it's worse than you think in many ways. But when do most people actually have that contact for that? They just are weird. Most humans are removed from indigenous culture. They're just removed from it. I mean, most people are removed from Black people. Like, they're not going to see any indigenous people. I mean, it's like, you kidding
Don't
me?
say that. You're my one Black friend.
I know. It's like,
Kidding, I'm just kidding.
and so
Yeah.
many, or they're removed from Muslim people, or they're removed from whoever. It's just these massive silo monoculture situations. So then when you see a movie like Wind River, you are like transported to like, oh shit, that happened. That happened.
That goes back to that quote I shared with you about, Roger Ebert's quote about why we like good movies, because they transport you to the perspective, and I'm paraphrasing poorly, but the perspective of a different culture, a different economic class that you're used to. So it doesn't matter who you are. If you're a poor white guy or a rich Black guy, but then you watch a movie that transports you to somebody else's culture, somebody else's thing, and the embracing of that. I was really happy to see how well Wind River was received. I don't know actually what its box office
Yeah, I don't know either.
was, but it was critically received really well. And I was like, thank goodness, because more movies like this need to be made. And it's really interesting. We demonize a lot of people like John Wayne, and perhaps rightfully so. I don't know enough about his personal life. I'm never curious enough about celebrity, but I have grown up watching a lot of John Wayne movies. And I can tell you that there's a difference between the movies he made when he was younger and the movies that he made when he was older. And in quite a few movies he made when he was older, it was actually kind of championing in the rights and respect of indigenous peoples. And one movie in particular just came to mind, which is, I mean, if I tell people I like this movie, they're going to judge me, but it's called McClintock. And it's about John Wayne as a rich cattle baron who owns all this land and used to be an Indian fighter and used to fight with the tribes that he's now friendly with. And it's all about being a man and putting his woman in her place. And, there's so many things wrong with this movie. I'm not here to defend it on as a whole, but there's two scenes in particular that are worth their weight in gold. And there's one scene where he's talking to his daughter and he's talking about how he's not going to leave his daughter and whoever she marries a bunch of land and a bunch of cattle, because he wants her to grow together with her husband and not just be rich.
Yeah.
And he even says, what he is going to leave to her is a lot more than he and her mother had. And there's a lot of growing that happens when two people build something together. That's a wonderful scene. It's an amazing scene. But the other scene is when John Wayne his character is speaking at this trial in defense of the tribe that's there and is being run out, basically. And there's a couple of genius things that they did with this scene. One is that they have John Wayne speaking on behalf of the Native Americans that he is so famous for in his movies fighting against.
Yeah.
The other is that John Wayne doesn't use his own words. Instead, he's translating what has been written for him to say by the tribal elders. So he doesn't take it upon himself to be white savior. And in no point in the movie does he save these indigenous people. They work it out for themselves, and they do their own thing. And I won't talk too much more about that movie, but the fact that he, of course, in court, they're going to listen to a white guy more than they are going to listen to the tribal elders. But the fact that they had the consciousness to have him speak their words instead of his own, which of course is being written by white people, I'm sure, for the script.
Yeah.
But the script writers are conscious enough to say, we're going to have him speak their words, not his. I just think there was so many things so good about this movie and how they did those things. And this is back in the 60s.
Yeah.
And we haven't come farther from that. We haven't gotten any real, with exception to movies like this one, Wind River, and some other things. To your point, once again, in the national consciousness, we haven't moved the needle.
No. At all.
On this conversation. We haven't given them their own voice. And we haven't recognized it.
No.
And it's a tragic thing. And what do you expect from a people who you've taken everything from?
That's exactly right. It's almost similar to, I talk about this, like the plight of indigenous Native people is on some level very similar to the plight of Black and African American people. Yeah. On some level, like the level of desecration and slavery and destruction. There's varying levels, but it's still this whole concept of get yourself together, pull yourself together, work harder. Okay, there are such things as generational trauma. I can tell you this, as a Black man, I feel the history of my people. I don't even know, I can't explain it. I cannot explain it. But I feel it. Like I feel it's in your bones. It's deep within me. And I feel being Black, you feel it. There's something different there. It's hard to make it. And I would imagine is very similar with indigenous people. It just runs through you like a freight train. You can't help it. Whether you try to run from it or not, it just becomes very apparent. And how does a nation of underrepresented people like that, how are they supposed to move forward on their own after so many centuries of being persecuted and put down? How does that, the people who have the narrative, who created the narrative, have to be a large part of helping. You can't just say that these people must pick themselves up and do it themselves. It's just impossible. I just don't see it.
It is. And that's when conversations about things like reparations and things like that, I'm all for it. And I don't know how, I'm not an educated enough person to know what form and how those things need to take place and things like that. But I do know that in order for people to move forward, so take myself, for example, I have inherited being born into a family of what I'm trying to say, just medium economic stature, not rich, not poor,
sure,
but closer to rich than poor. I won't, not even close to rich, but closer. And had a lot of privilege in my life because of that. I was born into the religion I came into and things like that. So what I'm trying to say is I have all these built-in things, these
Yeah.
built-in advantages. And I'm trying not to use the word privilege because I know that's a hot button word. So I'm just going to say advantages.
Mhm.
But I was born with so many advantages at my disposal that were ripped away from other people, or
Yes.
that they were never had in the first place. And let's take African Americans as a prime example of this. How do you go from slavery to successful? You have nothing to inherit from slavery. You know, there's no there your culture's been ripped from you. You don't own land. You know what I'm saying?
Of
It's
course.
like I was born into an already established set of advantages that if I were to fail in my life, it would be because I did something horribly wrong.
Right.
Not be, I mean, the what somebody of African American heritage has to do to be successful versus what I would have to do in my life to be successful. I mean, we're talking about the difference between, walking down the street or running a marathon.
Of course.
You know what I
Of
mean?
course, man. I actually have a good story about this real quick. Like, um, you know, I was telling my wife, who's white, and I said, listen, we're on the coast here. We live basically on the beach. We've got a gold mine for a home. Like this thing, the housing market. And I said, I want you to understand this. I'm not trying to be offensive when I say this. I said, this is what white people have done. They've taken advantage of land ownership and have had equity and moved up and, generations of passing things down. I said, I want that. I want that. And I said, this is our ticket for that here to potentially move at some point and then create a larger amount of wealth because of the market down the line. And she's like, I just never thought about it that way. I said, how could you think about it that way?
Yeah.
And I was like, my job is to tell you that this is a rare opportunity for someone like me. And I will not let that go. I will not let that go. My people, we've never had stuff like this. And I think it like dawned on her. It's just like, how could I argue against that?
Yeah.
Like, I can't argue against that. Like, this sets up both us and our daughter, who was Black, African American.
Mhm.
And I said, you think about this mindset. Unlike my great grandfather was a slave. I was like, look how far the Parker family has come from there. You think I'm going to give that up?
Yeah.
Like, no way. I was like, you're crazy. You're crazy.
Yeah.
And I think that was like a watershed moment for my wife to realize, like, hey, listen, I don't take this stuff for granted. I'm not saying she does, but my thought process is definitely different than someone else who is not me.
Exactly. Exactly. And to take that to today and say, minorities who've been pushed out of or not allowed into the nice neighborhoods historically, who've not been allowed to invest in the better real estate, the better housing markets and things like that. And then to turn around and say, well, why aren't you doing better? Why aren't you more successful? The play and movie Raisin in the Sun deals exactly with this, subject matter. And it does so in a beautiful, beautiful way. And I challenge anybody to go watch that play or watch that movie with Sidney Poitier and so many other great actors, Lou Gossett Jr. and all these other people. I mean, I dare anybody to go and watch that and understand that it's not just a play. It's actually a true story.
That's right.
And go watch that and tell me that African American people or other minorities who've been in similar situations should have built, pulled themselves up by their bootstraps by now.
It's so ridiculous.
It's like, I mean, this legacy of slavery is more than slavery itself. It has to do with all the prejudice and racism that goes on after it. That's the real legacy. The legacy, yes, there's a legacy within the African American community, but then there's a legacy outside that community that is exactly what we're talking about. It says, we don't want our community mixing with yours, or your community, better said, we don't want your community mixing with ours.
Yeah.
That's the real legacy there that is so destructive.
Yes.
To people being able to better their circumstances and level the playing field.
Yeah, most definitely. And it's just this movie just brought me back to all of that, And sometimes I'll be honest with you, straight up honest. Sometimes when you're Black, I mean, you always know you're Black, but sometimes it's not always in your consciousness when you're just living your life all the time.
Sure.
But then like there's certain points when like it feels more elevated, and I like, at least on some level, people of my ethnicity have had some opportunities. Indigenous people, I mean, I don't know, man. I don't know of a lot of opportunity. I just don't see it. Maybe I'm naive to it, but it doesn't seem like it,
So I never want to throw anybody under the bus, so I won't name any names.
Yeah.
But recently somebody told me of an experience, and this is somebody in a generation older than you and I. But they said that they were up for a scholarship and they didn't get it, and they were a straight A student, and it was given to an Indigenous person who got worse grades than they did.
Yeah.
And they said that they felt like, that was offensive to them because they felt like they had earned the scholarship, whereas the other person just got it because of their culture and their race. And I decided that wasn't a battle I wanted to fight in that moment. But the thought that came into my head was like, well, I guess when somebody commits genocide against your people, we can talk about whether or not you'll get that scholarship. Right.
Seriously,
like,
man.
I mean, you're going to begrudge somebody a scholarship after we've committed genocide against their people?
It's the least you could do. I mean, it's like the bottom
give
level.
them a doggone scholarship, for heaven's sakes.
I mean, come on. I mean, college should be free for all Indigenous people. I mean, seriously. I mean,
those
education.
are the kind of reparations that I think are the bare minimum we could do. State schools, it should be free for these different Indigenous peoples. And, if that means a white person has to choose a different school, so be it. I am not a crusader of the politically correct.
Yeah.
In fact, I kind of stand on the opposite
we know this.
side. Yeah. It's like, if anybody's been listening to this podcast,
Jesus the bastard.
Yeah,
we know.
Yeah. I mean, so don't get me the wrong way that I'm just like this crusader of, in fact, just recently I was telling one of my daughters, I said, one of the best practical jokes of the whole LGBTQ movement of the last 5 to 10 years is that the stance of saying, wanting everybody to accept that gender is on a spectrum, which I'm totally fine with, by the way. And I can get totally down with it. It's not what I grew up with. So it's kind of a new perspective for me as well within the last 10 years, but I am completely down with it. However, then they go, the same people who want you to believe that tell you that you're either an ally or you're not. And I was like, but what about the spectrum?
What's the spectrum? There's a spectrum here.
Isn't there a spectrum between ally and non-ally? Can't we be anywhere along the path?
Yeah.
Anyway, I just thought, things like that I think are just so hilarious, and every movement has hypocrisy within it. And I think that's just something really important to recognize. And if we have put ourselves into a situation, whether or not it's a religious or political or any other situation like that, where we have kind of devoted ourselves to that, we have to accept that within that, there's going to be an inherent hypocrisy that we have to grapple with. And we have to kind of deal with the paradox of wanting to avow ourselves to something and also see the inherent flaws in it. And that has to go along with just generally calling ourselves an American.
Yeah.
You can be as proud and as flag waving as you want, but you also have to see the general flaws in our history, accept them, accept that they still go on today and they still need correcting. And we can argue about the form that takes. But I think the thing that's inarguable is that there is a need to do lots of course correcting, and that unfortunately in a lot of ways it's too late,
Yeah.
but we can still do the best we can with what we have.
Well said, my friend. Well said. Man, that's a great way to end it. I mean, very eloquent. And I love these things just go from movies to like serious stuff, man. Like it drops into the consciousness of being a human all the time, and
Hopefully that's what the messaging of this podcast, or these episodes that
Yeah.
you and I are doing of your podcast, hopefully that's the messaging there. Look deeper in these movies that we're watching. There, I would say very rarely does a writer or a director not want to say something
Yes.
with their movie,
Yes.
and with their film. So, we need to stop watching films so passively, because even in the silliest comedies, sometimes there's messaging there, and I don't mean that on a superficial political way, but I think there's people normally do things with intent.
Yes.
And so when I watch movies, I'm constantly looking for the intent of the film, not to judge it good or bad, just to see what more I can get out of it.
Most definitely. Awesome. Simon, thank you so much. I'm just like always blown away by these conversations. I
know, these are so great. I look forward to them so much. I'm always thinking like, I wish these were twice a month.
We can make it. We can make it happen. We can make it happen. We'll talk about it for sure. Everyone,
right,
Thor, Love and Thunder, right in front of you here. The Norseman, Simon Milliman. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you. Take it easy.